Hi, I'm David Luther with the Jefferson City Public Schools, and for today's program, we're going to be talking about the Secondary Schools Study Committee and the work that they've done in preparation for 3 facilities that we're looking at as a school district, and we're also going to be talking about the Career Academy path. So I have 2 guests with me today. Both of them are community members and members of the Secondary Schools Study Committee. First of all, Brenda Hatfield, welcome.
Thank you.
And I have Mark Backus with me as well. You two have been working on this committee for quite a while now. Give me just a little bit of background information on how the committee happened to come together and what type of work that you've been doing. Just walk us through the almost 18 months that we've been together.
Well, about 18 months ago, we got some phone calls from a variety of folks who wanted to know if we would be interested in helping do something with the Jefferson City Public Schools. Dr. Mitchell, when he came to the district almost 2 years ago, had indicated that our school plan, or our CSIP, had indicated that we should look at the option of having a second high school. But what was exciting, I thought, when I got to join the committee was it wasn't just about a second high school. It was really about looking at all of secondary education and making sure that we understood what we needed to do for the future of the district beyond 1 high school, 2 high schools, 12 high schools. That wasn't the point. The point was, how do we improve Jefferson City Public Schools in secondary ed?
And Mark, what were some of the early discussions with the group? What sort of things were they talking about as far as curriculum, or as far as what did we want to see as high school graduates?
In the early days of the committee, those first few meetings we had, it was funny, we had the subcommittees that broke out into our individual rooms, and it was geared around, okay, we're going to have a subcommittee really take a look at our curriculum piece and how we improve that, and how do we build a curriculum framework to make that happen. I remember we looked at, okay, how do we take the communal aspect of the high school and how do we take a look at that? And there was a group looking at the facility aspect, and just a lot of different subcommittees breaking out. And after our subcommittee work, we would come back, and I remember those times of coming back together were really good times where, to me, and I was just asked by a friend to be on the committee, a couple of mutual contacts, but I remember after the first couple meetings leaving that room going, I'm amazed that a room full of 40 to 45 people who don't know each other in a lot of different ways are this passionate about how do we produce, and we spend a lot of time talking about this, how do we produce a Jeff City High School graduate that fits these 8, 9, 10 characteristics? How do we make sure that every student fits that characteristic when they graduate?
And there was a lot of time, it took us a few months. I'm also on the committee. It took us a few months to really get traction. Yes. There were some great things, and I don't think there was any doubt there was a lot of passion in the room. There were some arguments about what we should be doing, and that was a good thing. But eventually we started to get some focus, and that's kind of what we're going to be talking about today. In fact, why don't we go ahead and just jump straight into the discussion about career academies, or we'll call them academies for this particular discussion. And what I'd like to ask is the producer is going to put up a graphic that has a wheel of different academies that we've been discussing. And these academies came about through discussions in our group, but also we later learned that, hey, amazingly, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education was also looking at these things. Let's talk a little bit about, first of all, what types of academies are we at least considering?
Well, from my perspective, the academies are the most exciting aspect that came out of this group, because when you look at the fact that you could take your students and divide them into smaller communities, so smaller learning communities, and have those learning communities actually be tied to a subject area. Let's say, for example, that your student is interested in agriculture, food, and natural resources. That could potentially be one of our academies. And it isn't that they would not get all of the same subjects as everyone else, it's just that many of the examples and the hands-on activities they would use would be geared towards that field. We were also looking at something about education, training, government, might be an academy, architecture, construction, manufacturing, health sciences, arts and audiovisual, business and management, and then potentially an international baccalaureate program, which to me is taking your traditional AP classes up a notch so that those students who are highly motivated get the opportunity to pursue even better education than they currently have with our AP program.
3 words that Myron Graber, who's the Director of Secondary Education, has used is rigor, relevance, and relationships. And Mark, earlier before we came on the air, we were talking a little bit about these academies and how many kids would be in them. Talk a little bit about the importance, in your opinion, of the relationship component.
Right, and in the early days of the committee, one of the general sentiments that we talked about frequently that we wanted any plan we came up with moving forward to address was the perception that Jeff City High School is big. There's just a perception, and there are quite a few students, and it's this big place where kids can get lost, and there's a lot of perceptions in the community of what that looks like and how that might feel. And so when we began to hone in on the academy concept, we began to see how you could really take a large number of students and begin to make it feel small. And as you broke out the academies and made each of the academies into groups of 300 to 400 students, how as a student transferred through freshman to senior year, how the relationships not only with a smaller number of students that they would spend a greater amount of time around, but also with the same teachers as they progress through their high school track, and the importance that relationship piece, not just with the students, with their peers, but with their teachers, and how important that would be in helping graduation rates and preparing that student for graduation. And so we focused a lot on that. We've talked at length about why that's so important and how important the relationship for each individual student is as they progress through their high school career.
Obviously, yeah, I'm sorry, Brenda. It's important that a student feels connected to their school. In the academy format that we've talked a little bit about, there's basically a principal, counselor, and support staff, as well as teachers for that group of kids.
Absolutely.
So that's a little bit about the relationship part. Let's talk about the relevance part, though. Brenda, earlier you referenced you have a 9-year-old daughter, okay? She might have a particular interest. And by the way, there is a way. We already survey our students to determine what their areas of interest are coming out of 8th grade. Let's talk a little bit about the rigor and the relevance, though.
I think the exciting aspect of that for me is that the kids will actually get to use examples from a topic that's of interest to them. So if you are on the engineering track and that's very important to you and that's something that you could really relate to, we've then tied your core subjects, whether that be English, math, science, or social studies, back to some of those examples that would be relevant to your coursework. Think about agriculture. When I was in school, I was in the FFA, and one of the things that you could do with the FFA was tie many subjects back to that agricultural learning. That's really what we're talking about with academies, is giving kids those opportunities. But the best part is we're also going to offer single classes or singletons. So if your child wants to be in band and engineering, that's perfectly acceptable. They're still allowed to go and be with the big band with the other kids from the other 6 or 7 academies. And to me, that's very exciting because we're not saying that your child is pigeonholed into one area. Instead, they have a wealth of opportunities.
So we have rigor, relevance, relationships. One of the other things that we've talked a lot about in the committee, and we began talking about this in our public forums, is with these academies, there's also a great opportunity to build relationships outside of the school, and I'm talking about business relationships. So for example, if we have an agricultural based career path, there's no reason why we couldn't work with some of the local farming industry. There's a number of different areas where we could bring in people who are in the business field. They work with our kids. Those kids are going to be more prepared when they go out into the workforce or go into college or go into the military or whatever it might be. They're going to have a much better idea of how that all works. Any other thoughts on those 3 terms, rigor, relevance, and relationships?
Well, when you look at the economic community of Jefferson City, and you look at the structure of the academies on the graphic that was on the screen, you begin to notice that really a lot of the academies begin to mirror the strengths of the economic community of Jefferson City. And so if the learning that takes place throughout high school is related to the economic community that these students will face once they graduate, and it's in partnership with the local business community, really what you're doing is helping build a capable and ready workforce for the economic community, for the businesses in town and for the industries in town as students graduate, which only fuels and helps Jefferson City. It helps the student, but it also helps the businesses to have graduates who have been working with them and building on projects that will be real world to them when they step out of those doors when they graduate.
So that's just a nutshell of the academies. Obviously, there's a lot more to it. And again, we would invite people to come to the public forums and the open houses to learn more about them. I do want to finish our first segment with a thought. Jim Collins wrote a series of books, Good to Great. And you've heard Dr. Mitchell say this before. Can you talk a little bit about good to great as far as the work of the committee and what we're striving for these schools?
I think from my perspective, over and over again within the committee, it was apparent that everyone believes that we have good schools and we have students who are doing great work in them. But the enemy of good schools, or I mean the enemy of great, is the fact that they are good. And so sometimes we sit back and we say good is good enough. Well, this committee says good is not good enough. We want to have great schools, and we see the academies as a wonderful way to provide our students with even more opportunities than I could have possibly imagined having when I was a kid.
Mark, anything else you'd like to add?
And I think the sentiment that is built within the community, with the committee, and it's been interesting to watch this transformation happen, is instead of focusing on how we can go be like someone else around us in some other community around us, the committee really began to look at and say, how can we take a step and be the model? How can we be the place excuse me, that other communities want to emulate, other communities want to model? How can we be something special in our community?
All right, so we've talked about academies, rigor, relevance, and relationships, a little bit of background information. When we come back from a break, we're going to talk a little bit about facilities, the different options that we're looking at, and a little bit more about these public forums that are coming up.
Half of America's most important military decisions are made here. No, it's not the Pentagon or NORAD or the headquarters of Air Combat Command. It's the place that employs over 50% of our armed forces. It's where you work.
See you in a couple weeks.
So when your employees in the National Guard and Reserve need time off to serve, give them the freedom to protect ours.
Don't be a dummy. Buckle your safety belt.
Well, we've had a chance to talk a little bit about the academy format, but I know that a lot of people are really interested in what the facilities might look like. Obviously, perceptions of the high school maybe were that's what lit the fuse for some of this discussion. But we have moved into a much bigger picture. We started talking about not just 9 through 12 education, we've been talking about middle school education. We've even talked a little bit about elementary education. But for the sake of today's conversation, it's 9 through 12. Simonson 9th grade has served us well for many years. Although if you look at the 3 facility options we're looking at, Simonson is very likely not going to be a part of that. So what we're going to ask the producer to do is roll option A, and we're going to talk a little bit about option A right now. And Brenda, why don't you walk the audience through option A? You're not going to have it in front of you, so you can just kind of talk about in general what we have going on.
Option A is using multiple campuses, but with the academy format. All 3 options use the academy format to deliver education because we believe as a committee that really will enhance the educational experience for all of our students. We also believe it'll increase the enthusiasm for learning. But the easy way to think about the multiple campuses, we're going to utilize our current space that we have at the high school. We're also going to utilize some space across the street from the current football stadium, which is on South Stadium is what we're calling that, and it's also near the Knowles YMCA. We would have a couple of academies across the street. We would also have some academies in the traditional school that we have, and then we may be looking at some outside facilities, whether that would be Simonson or some other neighborhood facilities. It's not clear yet, but to have multiple campuses. We would also look at expanding some of the common areas, the cafeteria, the library, the gym space, some of those spaces that we're trying to have a lot of students in at one time or even throughout the day. And through the academy structure, we'll be able to help that a little, but we still need to look at those common spaces and make sure that we're renovating and adding on to those spaces.
So we're talking about using the existing high school. We're talking about Academies being at a new south facility, which is across stadium from the stadium. We're talking about using Thorpe Gordon. I think International Baccalaureate has been mentioned for that particular facility, possibly Simonson. So we have multiple campuses. All are going to have academies in them, okay? So what do you think the committee was thinking when they said, all right, we're going to place them all over the place like that? What was the basic thought process?
I think one of the thought processes is it would be cheaper. Quite frankly, to utilize the space we have and to only build a small building and then to look in the community for other resources is a less expensive option.
But am I correct? I mean, every one of these options has a price tag on it, okay? And I think, as I recall, option A, the one we're talking about right now, multiple campus academies, is anywhere from $41 to $45 million. So there's quite a bit of renovation involved in that. And of course, as you talked about, a new facility across from Stadium. So that's option A, okay? Option B, Mark, I'm going to call on you to talk a little bit about option B. Option B is a single campus situation, but we still have academies. So again, our producer is going to put an image of option B up on there on the screen. So tell us a little bit about what you see with option B.
In option B, the main focus is that we preserve one campus for the entire Jeff City High School in grades 9 through 12. In order to accomplish that, you have to do some things that you're not doing in the other options. So you take Thorpe Gordon and you turn that into additional space for Jeff City High School. You take Nichols Career Center and you turn that into additional space. You take the parking situation in front and you completely redo it. You roof in some areas between the current Thorpe Gordon and Nichols Career Center and the existing structure. You add, and so all of the renovation, but the single thrust is you preserve one campus, one site. But within that one site, you begin to design and architect and renovate in such a way so that the 7 academies that we talked about each have their own designated space within that. So while you may have one large overarching facility, once again, getting back to the academy piece, we're coming back to in one specific area of the site is going to be the 300, 400 students in the academy of choice, and designing it in such a way to make sure that the common areas are expanded and we add additional gym space and do all those things, but 7 small schools on one site, basically.
I think one of the things that is really key to this particular option, and you mentioned it, is the common space. Anyone that's ever visited Jefferson City High School in the past few years, and I think both of you have been over there, the classroom situation is generally not a problem. In fact, I believe that our classroom teacher to student ratio is around 19 or 20 to 1. Where we run into this perception, it's reality. When you start talking about is it crowded in the hallways, when the bell rings, it is crowded in the hallways.
Right.
When you get into the cafeteria at lunchtime, it's crowded in the cafeteria. Those commons areas are very important. And so as you talked about, what would happen is the high school has a street that runs between it, Nichols Career Center's on the other side. That would all be, the architects would work out such a fashion that that would be open area, would be used for additional cafeteria space, possibly library space, and so forth. I want to encourage our viewers to take a look at the district website. On the district website, these images are there, the graphics are all there. One of the things that I think is really important, and I'm going to ask Brenda to comment on this, and this is with almost every option. In 1964, when the high school was built, there were no girls' sports to speak of. Title IX came about in the early 70s, so tell me about gym space and things like that.
It was funny because when we were sitting in committee meetings and people kept saying we don't have enough gym space, not having a child at the high school yet, having an 8th grader and a 3rd grader, I didn't understand what they meant. And then I got clued in. Before Title IX, we didn't need all this space. That's when the building was built. But now when you look at, we're trying to have all of these sports options, and the committee's recommending the addition of additional varsity sports and intramural sports, we don't have enough space for these students to be able to do all that they want to do. So we really have to look seriously at expanding that gym space and the other common spaces.
With option A, additional gym space can be achieved at the new facility on the south side of stadium, across the football stadium. In option B, you have additional gym space. There's actually, the architect has created a situation where there's gym space that actually opens into the parking lot between the high school and the football stadium. In option A, there's additional gym space if we were to, again, the facility across stadium. Also, if we were to use Simonson Ninth Grade Center as one of the campuses. So gym space is going to be there. That's important. And it's not just about athletics, it's about physical education classes, and we want to make sure that our students have opportunity for that.
And band. How many times has the band played in the gym space?
Absolutely.
And one thing that we should mention for the viewers who saw the diagram for option B is option B would include having to find or create a new elementary school somewhere within a similar area of the city.
That's a great point. Thorpe Gordon would need to be moved because we would use that as part of the greater facility. And we'll talk a little bit more. When we have an opportunity to come back and do a second show, we can talk a little bit more about the elementary situation. So let's go to the third option, where we have, well, I'm just going to turn it over. Brenda's been talking about this at some of our public forums, so tell us a little bit about what option C might look like, and we'll ask our producer to put option C graphics up for just a moment.
Option C is where we divide the high school in half, and typically we believe that would be along middle school boundaries. So the Lewis and Clark students would go to one high school, and the Thomas Jefferson students would go to another high school. For the purposes of this drawing, and it is not a final recommendation, but for the purposes of this drawing, we have located that on that South Stadium property so that we can show everybody what it might look like and what that might take. Again, we're going to have academies. That's something that we're very committed to, and we believe that the students breaking them into smaller groups is really in the students' best interests and will help them. We would try to share the athletic fields. That football stadium, we would use it for both schools so that both schools could have access to it on a rotating basis. We would also try to make sure that everybody had the enhanced gym space, everybody had the enhanced libraries. It's going to require, obviously, the building of an entirely new school, plus extensive renovations on the current high school, with the goal to be that the high schools are completely equal, so that whatever we have at one high school, we have at the other high school, so it doesn't matter which one your students go to, they're going to be having access to the exact same resources. And
I think when people talk about, and we can be very frank about this, two high schools, as we talked about earlier, that was sort of the launching point for a lot of this discussion. Again, just to reiterate, the high school does not necessarily have to be on that piece of property. However, the school district already owns that piece of property. If it were to be located elsewhere, then we would have some additional costs that we would need to look at. You're looking at the property, and sometimes there's going to be, a variety of other things involved, running electric, sewage, and so on and so forth. But we don't want anyone to be turned off for any of these options. We want them to take a look at them and see for themselves what they might look like, learn a little bit more about Academies, because there's definitely plenty there to go through. Again, a lot of this information, almost all of this information, is on our district website. We've also posted a lot of videos up, and I have to be honest with you, I didn't know a lot about Academies, but watching some of these videos has gotten me a little, I'm pumped about the idea, I'll be completely frank. I love traditional education and what we're offering, but some of these things, I look at my own children and I think, that might be something that really is going to connect with them. So we have multiple campus academies, option A, a single campus academy, which is option B, and two separate high schools, which is option C. Anything else you guys would like to add in regards to the three facility options that we've been talking about?
I think what we're looking for over the coming weeks and months are, okay, the committee's been doing its work for 18 months. We've had our share of discussions and passionate debate, and so now we're presenting these options to the community because we desperately and definitely want their feedback. We need the folks that are going to be sending their students to school alongside our students to now take a look at those drawings, get involved in this process, and give us your feedback. And at the end of that process, we're going to arrive at an option that, regardless of whether whether you think option A is the best or option B or C is the best, the reality is we all want Jefferson City Public Schools secondary education to take a major step forward and be a beacon moving forward. And so we'll get behind whatever option we come up with, but we want the community feedback to make sure that we arrive at the very best option we can.
Right. Brenda, anything else you'd like to add?
I think the future is bright for Jefferson City Public Schools, regardless of what we choose to do with facilities. We have excellent staff who are doing wonderful things with our students, and now we just need to provide them with the resources so they can take those students even higher.
And two things that you just noted, I want to touch on those before we conclude today. People say if you're going to move to an academy situation, what does that mean for teachers? And certainly as a former teacher, and I think I can speak for a lot of teachers in our district, there's anxiety about that because how people teach in academy is a little bit different. And so part of the funding that would come from our community goes towards professional development. We have to put our teachers in the best possible position that they can be successful with this. So there'll be a lot of professional development to get them geared up. And also there's a technology component. With each one of these, we have to do a lot of enrichment with our technology and make sure that the kids have the tools that they need in order to be successful. So we've talked about the academies, we've talked about the options. We're doing this very quickly. We're trying to tease people into coming out to the public forums and the open houses. Another graphic that perhaps our producer can put up, we have public forums scheduled for April 7th. The show may actually be showing after that. The second one is April the 12th. Those will be at Jefferson City High School at 7 o'clock in the evening. We've done one in Holt Summit already. It took about an hour for the presentation and about another hour to answer questions. So I think people can expect to come for an hour to an hour and a half. And then we're going to do open houses, which is maybe an opportunity for people just to go and take a look at the three options and also learn more about academies without going through a special presentation. Those dates are April the 19th and April the 21st. After we get through the public forums and the open houses, as Mark alluded to, we're going to survey our community. We'll be doing a telephone survey. We'll also be doing a survey online, so everybody will have a chance to weigh in on this and kind of see what resonates. Which option do they like? What do they like about the various options? What do they think about the academies? And hopefully we'll get some direction from our community and the committee can move forth. And perhaps within the next year, the community might be making some bigger decisions. Hopefully. So that's what we have. Brenda Hatfield, Mark Backus, thank you very much for joining me, talking about this exciting adventure for the Jefferson City community and the Jefferson City Public Schools. Thank you.
Thanks.